All right. I'll give some quick headlines. You can fill your thoughts and then I'll fill the rest in. So, our first game kicking off Saturday afternoon was the Jazz and the Mavericks, a defensive slugfest, a final score of 99-93 for the Jazz. And on through half, you kind of had the sense we weren't getting into triple digits, but I wasn't even sure we were getting into the 90s the way this game went. The big picture for Mio was a talented offensive team that played sloppy non-playoff basketball versus a team with limited offensive capabilities that really did their best defensively, really locked in, but just didn't have the depth, the secondary scoring, or the clutch moments to pull out a game that was within their grasp, and maybe it shouldn't have been without that sloppiness.
Yeah, this Dallas team is an upper half defensive team and has been all season. They really went all in by shipping Porzingis out the door to not having that one guy that you can really attack at any time. And Luka Doncic, just going to say it, is probably the worst defender on that floor at any given time for the Mavericks. And so you take him out of the equation, and they're a really solid defensive team, 1 through 5, which means that Utah is going to struggle to score when one of their players in Rudy Gobert is not an offensive engine. So it is playing almost a little bit of difficult basketball when you're going up against a team that's really dialed in defensively. What that means for Dallas, though, is Luka has the highest usage rating in the league. He runs their entire offense. And so, of course, they're going to struggle. I loved what I saw from Jalen Brunson. He's going to have to be big in the remainder of this series, hopefully, if Luka's back. But that is really what you had, is a team that dialed in defensively and couldn't have the same level of creation. And we dialed it back 20 years to the playoffs in the 90s. And that's kind of the scoreline that we saw. Gobert really allowed to be free and kind of the best version of himself in terms of his defensive prowess, not getting hung out too much to dry in isolations or having to close out on guys in the corner, just because Doncic makes those passes better than almost anyone else in the game. And so a great performance by Gobert, really dominating the paint both ends for Utah. And you can see the fractures in this Jazz team, but winning always solves everything. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Brunson, fantastic. I thought, as you said, really, I love that like fundamental post play he does. Did his best to step up the playmaking in Luca's absence. Dinwiddie doing more or less exactly what you could ask from him as a Mavs fan when they acquired him. Nothing more for sure, but it kind of fell off after there and just not enough offensively. There's no stat to track what Gobert does. I guess you could look at a team's like points in the restricted area and in the paint on average on the season and then in games versus the Jazz, but just so many balls that he doesn't get a touch on, that like nothing will go down, but he just affects so many shots or makes the team work so much harder for it. Offensively for the Jazz, like you said, I think a lot of fractures showing. Donovan Mitchell, a really quiet, rough first half. Tough, makeable layups, floaters just weren't falling for him, forcing some threes that weren't going as well. Bojan Bogdanovic really kept the Jazz in the first half. He was sensational with just taking the right shot, making the most of the matchups in the paint, the post moves, the perimeter movement for him helped a Jazz team that really struggled with a 3-point outside of that. But second half, Mitchell just got it together. The confidence went up on the second make. I think it was a mid-range shot he created in empty space. And then those tough runners and floaters started to go. This game really didn't have to be that close. Like a 6-point difference. The Jazz looked like they were going to run away with it in double digits, but they got into the bonus, I think, in the first 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. And there was just this brutal run of sequences where they were fouling 30 to 100 feet from their own basket and giving the Mavericks just free throws. And they clawed their way back in the game. I think a travel from Mitchell, one or two other silly turnovers brought this game within 1 or 2 points. I think It was 88-87 and then 92-91 for the Jazz at different points throughout that game. But in the clutch moments, the experience gaps between these two teams showed. Mike Conley and Royce O'Neal, two players who were really quiet offensively for the Jazz all game, both had big moments in the last 4 or 5 minutes. Conley with a couple nice shots, Royce O'Neal getting his own rebound, restarting the play, and putting a dagger three-pointer away to take it. Whereas the Mavs, Brunson, Dinwiddie had been tough, resilient all game, but they just didn't have anything magical left in their back pocket the fourth quarter. And ultimately, that clutch difference, the final factor that put Jazz over